All right, welcome everyone to our third Scalable Pandas Meetup hosted by Ponder. My name is Peter Wilson, and I'm so excited to see all of you here today. I especially can't wait for you to hear from Alejandro, who's our main speaker, who I will introduce in a moment. Alejandro, could you go to the next slide?
Yes.
So as is obvious, probably this meeting is being recorded, and our plan is to put it up on YouTube. So if you have any issues with that, please let me know. You can email me at peter@ponder.io. So here's the agenda for today. So first of all, we're just going to briefly recap, like, why are we doing these meetups? What's the purpose of the meetup? We'll have some quick introductions, and then we'll turn the time over to Alejandro for the main event, which is a Modin overview. And we'll finish with some Q&A. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so why are we doing these meetups? The goal of the meetup series is to discuss the challenges that people run into when using pandas with really large data frames and complex workflows, and to discuss solutions to those challenges. So we'll share stories, practical advice, examples, and best practices, and we're eager to learn from everyone. So who is Ponder? Ponder is the enterprise-ready pandas company. It's the primary developer of the open source scalable pandas library Modin, which is over 3.5 million downloads, and we'll hear a lot more about this today. Why did Ponder start these meetups? So Ponder we began this in order to build a community, content and learning materials around best practices for working with pandas at scale. How often are these held? They're usually the fourth Thursday of every month. Our next one will be on Thursday, August 25th. And if you want to get involved, you can email me at peter@ponder.io with feedback or suggestions. So I'm excited to get to introduce Alejandro. So Alejandro is the solution architect at Ponder. Alejandro has a lot of experience in AI/ML. So he was at C3 as an AI/ML solution leader and had ML consulting experience even before that. Alejandro's hobbies are food and real estate. I was thinking about ways, Alejandro, that you can combine your hobbies. And well, an obvious one is like you can buy like restaurants. There's a lot you could do there. I have some friends from business school who they do things like you buy like 25 McDonald's and you might get a 4x revenue multiple. The cost of the whole thing, the valuation is like maybe 4 times revenue. But it turns out if you then buy a billion, like a bunch more McDonald's, you get to 100, you can then sell to a private equity firm at like a 6x multiple. So you get this big jump somewhere in the middle, and it's an easy way to. So, okay, that's one option. But I was thinking, Alejandro, you could also you could flip it, and instead you could make like food-shaped real estate. I just was reading about an Airbnb in Idaho where there's this giant sort of styrofoam potato that was very famous, and they were going to throw it away or something. It's part of next to a museum. I can't remember. I think it was styrofoam. But anyway, someone converted it into an Airbnb. You can go like live inside a potato. If you want to reach out to Alejandro, his email is right there.
All right. So today I'm going to go through an overview of Modin. I'm going to give you a demo of a practical example of using Modin in a Jupyter notebook. Talk a little bit about the overall system architecture, and then open it up for Q&A. So everybody loves pandas. I think most of you already know what it is. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here. I won't get into it, but it's flexible, it's easy to use, and it's everywhere. So that's that. The challenge with pandas that many of you have probably faced already is that it's really hard to scale. There are inherent constraints in the design of pandas that prevent it from really being useful at massive scale, particularly when you run pandas on your local machine or in AWS or GCP in the cloud. Pandas is running on a single core of the machine. So even as you upsize your machine, as you throw more cores at whatever you're working on, things tend to not really speed up very much because it's not utilizing all of the resources available in that environment. So because of that, the image on the right-hand side is a throwback to a past meetup for the folks that were able to join, where we talk about how you start off, the common workflow that we see is people start prototyping in Pandas, then when they're ready to move on beyond just a sample of data, they end up having to refactor their code into a big data framework. And that tends to just slow things down. It slows down the development cycle. So when we think about where Pandas fits into the data tooling ecosystem, we think of it at the top left of this quadrant, where it's really easy to use, but it's tough to scale. And on the bottom right-hand side, if you want that performance, you can use big data frameworks, but they're not usually as easy to use as something like Pandas. And so Modin is really trying to solve for that. It's trying to give engineering and data teams an option where you don't have to pick between performance or ease of use. You can have the best of both worlds. So Modin is a drop-in replacement for Pandas. All you have to do is change the import statement, and the rest of your code remains as is and scales. So because of the way Modin was designed, you can run it on much larger data sets, and it becomes faster as you grow your data. It's an open source project, so anybody can go and pip install it and try it out later today if you want. The open source project has been getting a ton of traction. So we just hit a huge milestone earlier this month. We passed 3.5 million downloads, have a bunch of contributors and a growing community. It's used in industry already. So companies like Google and Intel and Apple and many others are already using Modin in their workflows. And then my favorite thing about it, which is why I joined the team, is that it has a foundation in research, right? So it's not just some side project that came out of nowhere. Our team has been developing the theory behind data frames over the past 5 or so years, and that's all been going into this open source project. So I'm really excited to give you an example and a demo of what that looks like. Let me just switch over to that demo. All right, so just to dig right into it, this is a Jupyter notebook. I ran it in AWS on an EC2 instance. But just to kind of give you a little bit of background, whenever the Ponder or the Modin team meets up in person, we always have a big debate on where we should go and eat. And there's a strong contingent of people within Ponder, including Devin, I think Mahesh, who's on here, that love Taco Bell. And they absolutely love it. I like Taco Bell too, but I tend to favor, the mom and pop shops, the local places. And so it always gets to be a debate. And so as a data nerds that we are, what did we do but look at the data? And so we found this publicly available restaurant review data set from Yelp to try and get to the bottom of where we should go to dinner with the team. So in order to answer that question, we followed a pretty standard data science approach. We read in the data, we did some exploratory analysis to understand what's in it. We did some pre-processing and then got to some modeling. In terms of, just to dig right in, we're importing a bunch of standard libraries. You'll see matplotlib, Seaborn for visualization. The one I really want to call out here is Pandas and Modin. So we're importing Pandas as old PD and Modin as PD. And the publicly available data set, I have it in my S3 bucket on Amazon in this My Ponder demo bucket. And it's between two files, a business and a review table. I read that in using Pandas here and Modin here. You can see that the syntax between Pandas and Modin is the same. And right out of the gate, we get 3x faster ingestion from using Modin. So now we dig into the data. We do some exploratory analysis. we see that the business profile information includes things around the location of the business and the category of the business. Yelp has a bunch of different types of businesses, from barbers to restaurants to more. The reviews data set here, just a preview here, we can see the actual text included in the reviews as well as the stars. In terms of sample size, this is a sample of the overall data set, but we can see that we have just over 5 million records, most of which are in the reviews file. So next, I like to usually just do a simple histogram to understand what's in my data. Again, the goal here is to figure out, are we going to go to Taco Bell or are we going to not go to Taco Bell? If we just first take a look at the distributions, we get a sense of kind of the breakdown of the star ratings across our reviews. One thing I want to call out here is that whether I was printing the data frame or using Seaborn to do this histogram, the user experience between using Modin and Pandas is exactly the same, right? The data frame looks the same, the histogram looks the same, and you'll see that throughout the presentation. So to get to the bottom of what we're really trying to solve for here is to Taco Bell or not Taco Bell. And the quick and dirty way to answer that question is by just comparing average stars, right? What are the average stars of Taco Bell versus other Mexican restaurants? Since I'm a fan of the mom and pop shops, I was pleasantly surprised to see this difference between Taco Bell and not Taco Bell, and 2.6 versus 3.7. I was obviously eager to go and use this as evidence to convince the team to try a local spot. But as soon as I said it, these folks that I work with, obviously numbers and numbers guys and computer scientists, called me out on it immediately. They said, that's not a fair comparison, right? You're only using a sample of the data, and stars don't tell the whole story, right? One star can mean something totally different to one person versus the other. And so I said, okay, I'll dig into it. As we dug deeper in the EDA to try and respond to the concerns that the team had about my initial analysis, we started to look at a larger data set that was 5 times the size of that initial sample, so that we would make sure there's no bias or anything. As we tried to do that with Pandas, because of the single-threaded behavior that I described earlier that prevents Pandas from scaling, my system totally crashed. With Modin, however, the same analysis with a 5x sample ran in just about 2 minutes. And so the takeaway here is, because of the way Modin distributes things under the hood and manages memory for you, it tends to improve the reliability of your analysis and of your systems. So next was the question of, okay, stars don't tell the whole story. Let's dig into the actual reviews.
Alejandro, is it okay if we stop for just a second? We got a couple really good questions in the chat.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
So Sandeep asked about merge. So he sees merge happening, and he said, does Modin work with partition data like Spark to parallelize the process? Is there shuffling being done?
Yes and yes. We are in the process of redesigning our shuffling mechanism right now, Sandeep. We have a PR that's going to be merged in any day now, probably in the next week or two at most. So we're going to continue to see improvements in the underlying system, which will continue to improve these numbers.
And then could you say a little bit more before we go on about how Modin, we had a question about how Modin differs from Spark in general. Like, why would you use one over the other? And I think we can just briefly touch on this and then keep going and get to more questions at the end. But
yeah, I think it's all about the user experience and the learning curve. Spark is a fantastic technology. Obviously, it's it's done great things in the big data world. Modin is really trying to solve for something different. Most people that learn how to code in Python or take an intro to programming class, they learn how to use pandas. And so that's an audience that we're trying to support, not just the folks who have a deep computer science background and understand distributed systems, but anybody who knows Python is really who we're trying to support.
Awesome, thank you, Alejandro. Yeah, as other questions come through, I might ask them.
Okay, so next question is, what if we really look at what's in the reviews, right? Let's look at, are people happy or sad or angry or surprised in the actual reviews, to dig deeper and look beyond just the star rating. With any of these NLP related questions, we have to pre-process the data. And so we pre-process the data, we compare the performance with Pandas versus Modin. You'll see the exact same syntax here between the two. And if you compare the runtime between just over 30 seconds, we're doing 40% faster pre-processing on that text just out of the box. So that's really cool. And we're now ready to get to the modeling, right? We're ready to do the sentiment analysis. Right now, Hugging Face is the bee's knees in the NLP world with all the state-of-the-art models. So we're using a Hugging Face model. The pipeline does tokenization and then does the sentiment analysis. And so we have again, just to recap, we have the data set of the Mexican food reviews now, and we're going to try and see and label each review whether or not somebody is happy or sad with their experience. And unfortunately, if you do this in Pandas, again, because of the single-threaded behavior, it's not very efficient. In my case, with this data set, I let it run for 5 hours. I was really excited to get the results, and then it crashed, which was kind of a frustrating experience. With Modin, copying and pasting that code, I'm able to run the same analysis on that same data, but using a Modin data frame, and I'm able to do the whole thing in 20 minutes. So I'm doing over 12x faster, and I'm getting a more reliable output. So
in fact, you're getting an output.
well, yeah, an infinitely more reliable output. So okay, we have the labels for each review. What is, like, again, back to the question, to Taco Bell or not Taco Bell, we look at the overall distribution of the sentiment for Mexican restaurants versus Taco Bell. And we see that Taco Bell reviews, in Taco Bell reviews, people are actually 30% happier than other Mexican restaurants. And ultimately, Taco Bell wins, and we go to Taco Bell. So that is the demo. I'll pause there. Are there any other questions? And by the way, I do want to give a huge shout out to Kendall, Kendall Ruber. I think she was on here. I don't know if Kendall is still on, but
yes,
welcome. Your DoorDash analysis, which, by the way, I'm gonna link here, was a huge inspiration for this. And I'm dropping the GitHub link here for everybody. Please check it out. It's good stuff.
And for those who watch the video later, it's because they might not see the chat, it's github.com/kendallbug, KENDALL-BUG/DoorDash_reviews. You can search it in Google. Yeah.
Okay. So that's, I guess, do we have any other questions or no?
Yeah, so there were some other questions that came through. One of them was, this is a general question about, like, how does Modin work in an Anaconda world? So, like, are there different, you can conda install Modin. Do you know if there are any differences between conda installing Modin as opposed to pip installing it? Yep.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know too much about, I also am using Anaconda. So when I use Modin, I typically create a conda environment and then conda install Modin. But I'm not sure if what the implications are.
Yeah, it should be the same. Let me see what else I have. For the folks that are, I won't get too deep into this, but for the folks that are interested in understanding how Modin works under the hood, I mentioned this earlier, but Pandas is single threaded. So no matter where you run it, it's only using one of the CPUs, either on your laptop or in the cloud. And Modin was designed from the beginning to distribute all of that work under the hood and take advantage of all of the resources in the environment. So that's really kind of at a high level how it works and why it's faster and why it can scale. From a systems perspective, this is the overall architecture. Again, won't get into too much detail just because we're short on time. I'm sure in follow-up meetups, we can dig into some of these components. But basically you have the API layer, which is where users interact. So if you pip install Modin and start doing pd.read CSV, this is the layer that you interact with at the top. You have the core of the system, which is translating all of that Pandas code into lower level operators, and then pushing it down to the core execution engines that we support. So these are the different backends. Any questions on that? I'm happy to dig deeper if people are interested, but we don't really need to get into it.
Alejandro, we've had some questions in the chat about, and some of them have been answered, but I'll still mention them here so that those watching the video later will have access to this. So Sandeep asked, how much of the Pandas API is covered?
Yeah, good question. I think we're at like 93%, I believe, around 92, 93% of overall Pandas API coverage. I don't know of any other data frame framework that does anything like that besides Pandas itself.
And then how does that compare to something like koalas or do you know?
I have some, let's see. This is there you go. Can you see this, Sandeep?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're over 90%. Koalas, roughly over half. Dask, another one that we tend to benchmark against, around half, because they also have a data frame equivalent. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
We had another question that I'll just sort of read out because Mahesh answered in the chat, but for those watching the video later, there's a question about, often when working with pandas, Sandeep asked, you can speed things up by dropping to a NumPy array. So for example, df.column.values.mean. And he said, so with Modin, if I do the same, will the array also be parallelized? And Mahesh said, no, dot values, it'll give you just a regular NumPy array. Yep.
Okay.
So Sandeep just asked, is Ray the default? How does it differ from Dask?
We do default to Ray. How is it different from Dask? I think the roots of the project, the different projects are different. Ray was originally developed to support reinforcement learning workloads and more deep learning related workloads, while Dask is more of a general purpose parallelization framework. I don't know if Peter or Mahesh or Karthik or any of the other folks on the line want to jump in. Or...
Yeah, Mahesh, do you want to hop in? You answered with a little more detail in the chat.
Yeah, I actually don't know that much in general about the differences, but the way they work internally is quite different. For one thing, Ray will serialize data and put it in something called the object store. And Dask will just will have processes that keep their own objects. Yeah. So in Ray, all the data is that's stored is immutable.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Sandeep asked a question: does Modin scale with GPUs? He said, guessing not, but
we have an experimental cuDF backend, so you could almost think of it as like an execution kernel. I don't think it's, yeah, I don't think it's been supported very actively, but it's something that we've been hearing from folks. So good to know that that's of interest, Sandeep.
well, I'll say one thing that I am excited about with Modin is that it's already very good at many things, but there's so much stuff that can be done with the framework because it was sort of rebuilt from the ground up. I'm really excited to see, if we go back 2 years and look what Modin was then compared to today, like it's exciting to imagine 2 years and 4 years from now. Yeah, all of the things that can be built out without having to fundamentally change the infrastructure that's already been built. So that's exciting to me. Do we have any other questions? If not, yeah. So you can go back to you, Alejandro, for a moment, and then I have a final question about future meetup topics I'm interested in.
Basically, my email's at the bottom here. Feel free to email me if you have any questions about Modin or data or food. Yeah, happy to chat anytime.
Alejandro, thank you so much. That was awesome. That's really great. I want to spend just a moment, and we don't have to pick these particular topics, but I'm curious to hear Sandeep, Elvis, Kendall, Afiz, Benjamin, others, like, are there future topics you'd like to discuss at the Scalable Pandas meetups? We've had 3 meetups now, and it kind of in like a blast. So we had a first, and then 2 weeks later, we had this co-hosted one with CoRise, which is normally they're just going to be on the 4th Thursday of the month. And then we had this one. So our next one won't be till August 25th. But I'm curious, what are people hoping to get out of it? So it sounds like, Sandeep, you're interested in a deep dive on data frames, like what problems they solve. And there's a bunch of experts that we have access to who know a ton about data frames. So that's a cool one. Anybody else, like, are there, again, the purpose of this meetup is we're trying to get to a world in which you can use the Pandas API for lots of use cases that presently Pandas isn't equipped to solve. So you can use it with really large data frames. You can use it in production environments without having to rewrite to Spark. So as part of this journey to build a community around this, I'm curious if there are other topics that people feel like they would like to know more about or we should discuss together. I think I personally am quite interested in thinking through the differences between some of the existing tools. So like I could imagine a meetup where we invite some experts on koalas, on PySpark to come in and then we could have a discussion about like the things that those do particularly well. So that's exciting to me. If anyone else has any ideas, you feel free to email me at peter@ponder.io and let me know. So Sandeep suggested like tuning and optimization. So what can you do to get as much performance as possible out of Modin? I think that's a really great topic. Okay, well, we're excited hopefully to see you again on Thursday, August 25th, and keep an eye out. We're going to post this video shortly. Thank you so much, Alejandro. This is really great.
Thank you.